back to John Bolton. So 18 counts. 18 counts. That's a lot of counts. You have to take your shoes off to count to 18. If you can only count to 20, you got to take, you got your fingers, and then, some of the Democrats actually had to do that, by the way, because they are limited in their ability to count. Just saying. Nothing wrong with that. I don't blame them for not being educated. They wanted to study gay and lesbian racquetball specialties, so that's okay. But let's start with Bennett. Bennett, 18 is a pretty big number of things. They only got, this is something that people tend to forget. Dave Petraeus ended up taking a plea for a single count of mishandling documents and getting a misdemeanor. So, two-part question: do you think 18 is significant, and do you think they're going to give him the Dave Petraeus treatment? He gets everything reduced. So, over to you, Bennett.
I don't know. That's a lot. Well, look, it's 18 counts, but he's got a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
They're 18 really clean, uncomplicated counts. And I don't know about his nose, but his notes might be a big problem. He took those
Yeah.
yellow pad notes for a long time. That was his thing. He might have had those yellow pad notes from, back in the Bush days and the Obama days, and then the first Trump administration days. So I think he has a lot of notes, maybe on a lot of things, and some of the
Well,
things that
let me ask part
make
two
it
of the question, because I'm glad you bring that up, because one of the things notable, and you've been a friend a long time, when I went through and we had our nonsense with Darkheart, I had no classified documents, none, zero, none, not even notes. This was all done based on unclassified stuff, testimony I did, and yet they came after me anyway, and did all the redactions. So clearly, this guy maintained notes. He's admitted his attorney, Abby Lowe, who was Hunter Biden's attorney. That's a great vote of confidence. Just saying, has already said, oh yeah, he had classified documents, but they were cleared. Bennett, they don't give you cleared. They don't give you classified documents. They're either unclassified or they're classified. There's no, oh, they were classified, but they were clear. So you've been around a long time. You've had to, what do you make of them kind of admitting up front he had classified documents, but, well, he was told he could keep them? I don't buy that. What do you think?
uh, you're asking me. No, that doesn't
Yeah,
happen. Look, I'm an
that
intel
doesn't
guy
happen.
too.
No.
It's in the Navy Marine Corps Intelligence Training School, and that just doesn't happen, right? When they're marked, and that's the end of it. And there's not too many people that can unclassify them. And if they're
Yeah.
unclassified, then they're marked unclassified. So, he's got a little bit of a problem, I think.
Yeah. So Pete, over to you. So we've kind of framed his deal, but where do you think this is all going to go? Because John Bolton, and by the way, another guy that I'm on with often, Fred Fleitz, was his chief of staff. Fred won't talk about any of this. I don't know why. Maybe because he was chief of staff to John Bolton. I don't know. But it's very clear that Bolton seemed to think that he could get away with this. That he took these documents. Abby Lowe said, "Oh yeah, he had them, but it was okay." Who do you think is going to come out to be implicated further in this, or do you have any thoughts on that, Pete? And you're on mute.
Yeah, it's one of these things where I think what's going on is that Washington, D.C. is going through a change. I would guess, I can't prove any of this, but I would guess that sometime in the 70s, in the church committee hearings, that kind of thing, it became essentially a commonplace that there were a number of people in Washington, D.C., if you were on the in with the press, where it was simply known that you had, classified material, and
Yep.
lots of people did, and lots of people got away with it, and certainly if you read the autobiographies of a whole host of characters from the 70s and 80s and 90s and even this century, it's clear that they were doing things that they were carrying things around that they shouldn't have been. And they got away with it. And what's going on right now is that the status quo is no longer the status quo. You're not going to be allowed to do that, and that's appropriate. I go back to what Bennett and Tony were just saying. For everybody else in the military, and I got a bunch of buddies. I've talked to probably a dozen guys today, and every single one of them had top secret clearances when they were on active duty.
Right.
And every single one of them will tell you that they know exactly how many classified documents were in their house. Zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you didn't bring it home. You absolutely didn't bring it home. And if you somehow walked out of the building because you had just carried something over to the old man, the 3-star or 4-star, and you walked out of the building, got in your car and got in the car and drove out the gate and realized all of a sudden you have a confidential, not secret or top secret, a confidential document in your bag, you immediately turn around, go back to the base and put it in the safe. That's
Exactly.
what you do. Everybody does that. And it doesn't matter whether you're a junior petty officer or a 4-star admiral, you don't bring it home.
Right. So, and one of the operations I ran to your point, is Carolina Morning. Now, I'm not going to get into the details, but you and I both know how sensitive that was. And I'd run around with DC with lock bags, but nothing. It went point to point, and it was always locked up. And often it was locked up in the double skip. I mean, you're in a skip, and then you have to have another room for the other stuff.